History has a way of smoothing over the rough edges of reality, sanding down the uncomfortable truths until they resemble a perfect, polished fable. And there is perhaps no fable in the history of American capitalism more polished or more pernicious than the origin story of monopoly. If you were to open the archives of Parker Brothers or glance at the official histories circulated for decades, you would find a narrative that fits perfectly into the mythology of the American dream. It is a story set against the bleak, grayscale backdrop of the Great Depression, a time when hope was a scarce currency and survival was the only game in town. In this official version, the spotlight falls on a man named Charles Darrow. He is cast as the quintessential underdog, an unemployed heater salesman from Philadelphia, struggling to feed his family as the economy collapses around him. The legend tells us that in 1933, struck by a bolt of desperate inspiration, Darrow sat at his kitchen table and conjured a game out of thin air.
With nothing but oilcloth, handwritten cards, and scraps of wood, he supposedly invented a world where anyone could become a millionaire. It was a stroke of genius, we are told, a miraculous invention that saved not only Darrow from poverty, but also pulled Parker Brothers back from the brink of bankruptcy. It is a heartwarming tale of ingenuity, resilience, and the rewards of individual brilliance. But there is a singular, devastating problem with this story. It is a complete and total lie. It is a fabrication constructed by corporate interests to secure a copyright and erase a history that was inconveniently communal. The game that Darrow invented in the 1930s had actually been played for decades in university dorms, Quaker communities, and intellectual circles across the Northeast. It was a folk game, evolved and refined by thousands of players who added their own house rules, renamed properties after their own neighborhoods, and passed the game effectively from hand to hand.
Darrow did not invent the mechanics. He did not design the board. He did not even come up with the iconic property names like Marvin Gardens, a name he misspelled because he had only heard it spoken during a game, never seen it on a map. The narrative of the sole genius was not an accident. It was a weapon. When Parker Brothers purchased the rights from Darrow in 1935, they realized almost immediately that the game had a long, undocumented tale. To protect their investment and establish a monopoly on monopoly, they needed a clean origin story. They needed a single creator, a single date of birth, and a clean chain of title. And so the corporate machine went to work, aggressively silencing the past. They bought up old patents, paid off previous innovators, and cemented the legend of Charles Darrow in the public consciousness. In doing so, they didn't just tell a lie, they committed an act of historical erasure, burying the contributions of a vibrant community, and most importantly, the name of the woman who actually started it all. This was not just a business deal, it was a theft of intellectual heritage, a rewriting of reality where the profit motive justified the annihilation of the truth. The story of Charles Darrow is not a testament to creativity. It is a monument to the power of a well-crafted myth to eclipse the uncomfortable, complex, and collaborative nature of true invention.
To find the truth, we must strip away the varnish of the 1930s and travel back 3 decades earlier to the year 1903. The world was different then, teeming with radical ideas and a growing demand for social justice. In the shadows of history, obscured by the looming figure of the Monopoly Man, stands the true architect of the game, Elizabeth Magie. She was not a desperate salesman looking for a quick buck. She was a stenographer, a writer, an actress, and a fiercely progressive feminist who believed in the power of education to change the world. She was a woman who dared to speak her mind in an era when women's voices were systematically marginalized, and her game was her megaphone. Magie was a devoted follower of the economist Henry George, whose theories on land value taxation sought to remedy the gross inequalities of the Gilded Age. She believed that the monopolization of land, the very resource necessary for survival, was the root cause of poverty and social strife.
But she knew that dry economic lectures would never reach the masses. She needed a medium that was engaging, interactive, and visceral. She needed a game. And so, in 1904, She received a patent for what she called the Landlord's game. If you were to look at her original patent drawing today, the shock of recognition would be immediate. The square board, the continuous path, the corner spaces, the concept of go to jail, it is all undeniably there 30 years before Charles Darrow supposedly dreamed it up. But the soul of Magie's creation was radically different from the cutthroat version we play today. Her genius lay in the game's dual nature. Magie designed two distinct sets of rules, intending to demonstrate a powerful moral lesson. The first set of rules was known as the prosperity set. In this version, every player benefited when wealth was created. Land was a shared resource, and the game ended when the player with the least money had doubled their initial capital.
It was a model of cooperation, showing how Henry George's single tax theory could lead to a society where everyone thrived. The second set of rules was the monopolist set. Here, the goal was domination. Players sought to crush their opponents, hoarding land and bankrupting everyone else to emerge as the sole survivor. Magie's intention was for players to experience both modes, to feel the difference between the harmony of the shared economy and the brutal, soul-crushing reality of the monopolist system. She wanted the players to realize the inherent evil of land grabbing, to feel the frustration of being bled dry by landlords, and to instinctively reject that system. It is a practical demonstration of the present system of land grabbing, with all its usual outcomes and consequences, she wrote. The tragedy, of course, is that she succeeded too well in simulating the seduction of greed. The players who encountered her game in the ensuing decades found the cooperative mode dry and academic, but the competitive mode, the thrill of bankrupting a friend, the rush of total control, was addictive. The lesson she intended to teach was inverted. Instead of a warning against capitalism, her invention became a training ground for it. The nuance of her political statement was lost, stripped away by players who preferred the adrenaline of conquest to the quiet satisfaction of shared prosperity.
The journey of the Landlord's game, from Magie's hands to Parker Brothers' vaults, is a story of slow evolution and sudden theft. For 30 years, Magie's game lived a quiet, organic life. It was played by Quakers in Atlantic City, by students at Wharton and Harvard, and by left-wing intellectuals. It was a folk tradition, copied by hand on oilcloths, with rules modified and adapted by each new group of players. It was during this period of organic diffusion that the street names of Atlantic City were added, and the game began to take the shape we recognize today. But throughout this time, the core mechanics remained Magie's. The DNA of the game was hers. Then came Charles Darrow. He was introduced to the game in 1932 at the home of a friend, Charles Todd. Todd and his wife played the game with Darrow and his wife, innocently sharing the rules of what they considered a public domain pastime. Darrow was captivated. He asked Todd for a written copy of the rules, and Todd, believing he was simply helping a friend enjoy a hobby, obliged. He wrote them out, unaware that he was handing over the keys to a fortune. Darrow took those rules, made superficial changes to the artwork, and claimed the entire concept as his own. He didn't just copy the mechanics, he copied the errors. The misspelling of Marvin Gardens as Marven Gardens on Darrow's early boards is the smoking gun of his plagiarism, a mistake copied blindly from the hand-drawn board he had played on. When Darrow sold the game to Parker Brothers, the company initially celebrated their new hit, but as the game exploded in popularity, the truth began to seep out. Elderly players recognized the game. The 1904 patent was discovered. Parker Brothers realized they were sitting on a legal time bomb. Their exclusive game was actually based on a patent held by an elderly woman in Arlington, Virginia. They knew they had to neutralize Elizabeth Magie. George Parker himself went to visit Maggie. He did not offer her a partnership. He did not offer her royalties on the millions of sets they were about to sell. He offered her a flat fee of $500. He told her that her game would finally be mass-produced, that her name would be credited, and that her message would reach the world. Maggie, now in her late 60s,
and still desperate to spread her Georgist gospel, accepted. She believed that Parker Brothers would publish the Landlord's game alongside Monopoly, allowing the public to see the contrast she had always intended. She was wrong. Parker Brothers paid her the $500, bought her patent, and effectively buried it. They published a sanitized version of the Landlord's game briefly, with zero marketing support, ensuring it would fail just to fulfill the letter of their contract. Then they cast it aside. Charles Darrow became the first game designer in history to become a millionaire, feted as a genius of the Depression.
Elizabeth Magie died in 1948, her contribution erased, her earnings from the world's most successful board game totaling a mere $500. Her obituary didn't even mention the game. The ultimate irony is that the game she invented to warn society against the evils of monopolies became the global symbol of capitalist greed. She provided the tools to understand the trap, and the world used them to build the cage. Today, we restore her name to the board, not as a footnote, but as the creator whose warning we ignored at our own peril.